Welcome to my YouTube channel. I've been working as an independent director of photography for the last 25 years, but my time in television goes all the way back to my childhood. Never really on camera, just always being a tech, someone working with gear in the background, off of trucks or in studios. And this is an example of kind of what you do on your days when you're not out on a booked assignment getting paid. There's still things to do, gear to maintain, things to update. So this one's been piling up on my desk. I need to assemble my own mic flag for this cable news channel that's been very good to me the past 2 years, keeping my calendar pretty full. I'm grateful for all of that work. And next up is a massive stack of broken BNC cables. And I'm thinking back, I remember crimping a cable, may have been my first one 33 years ago. And while the cables have changed and the connectors going from analog to digital and then from SDI to HD SDI, the crimping process and mechanics of it are really the same. You know, you get basically two different cable types. You get like a solid center conductor, and then you've got a braided center conductor. So I'm going to go through the most common type of BNC cable today, which are all of my inventory, which are a solid conductor, which happen to be easier to repair. And with the right tools, it's something you can do out in the field in a matter of minutes. All right, first up are two broken 3-foot jumper cables. Someone taught me years ago to tie a knot on the broken end. That way it's obvious to everybody it's a broken cable and also indicates which side is busted, and you don't need any tape or any other items to get it done. So this is a 1505 Alpha Belden cable. This is made more for permanent installs than continuous field use, but the process is the same. All right, here are the three tools you need to conduct a field repair. I think these should be in every AC and utilities toolkit. A pair of end cutters. I'm going to switch to better end cutters in a little bit. A coaxial cable stripping tool and a pair of crimping pliers. Next, replacement crimpable BNC connectors that are rated for the cable type. So these are size for Belden 1505A. Now these cutters are from my electrical toolkit, and they're a little too bulky and crude for snipping cable. You can see here they kind of smash and crush the jacket of the BNC. I have a better pair of end cutters. I'll switch to, this is a coaxial cable stripping tool, and it's got two set screws on the bottom to set the blade depth for the inner shielding and the outer jacket. And then next, it's kind of a go by feel. Every connector is a little different in regards to the depth of where you set the cutter. It's not necessarily flush with the end of the tool. And this is the first cable I've made in probably 6 months. So I went a little on the long side because I don't remember exactly how long it needs to be for this specific Belden connector. Now the crimp connectors are made up of 3 pieces. You'll see here there is the crimping outer collar, and then you've got the actual nut connector, and the third piece is the center conductor pin. So first up, you want to make sure to remember to put that collar on first. And I actually should have slipped that on before I stripped the cable, because the outer shielding can bind up and make it difficult to push that connector on. You also want to be careful you don't stab your finger. So the center conductor can be needle sharp. Now, I'm sure the internet's going to correct me here on my process. Some crusty old engineer taught me how to do this when I was a kid. We didn't have the benefit of the internet, and certainly there were no videos to look up. Back in the day, it was all just passed on knowledge. And I was shown how to do this once. I don't think anyone's ever shown me since. So let's see what the internet has to say. But next up, that center conductor. Now this crimping tool, I believe this in the die here, and I'm going to remove the die so you can see here, there are different dies for different connectors, which correspond to a cable type. So you need to size everything proportionally to your cable. And I used to have dies for other cable types and RF antenna cable for microwave transmission, and I don't know, I've lost all that stuff over the years as it's not really relevant to me anymore. But you can see that center hole, I believe, is to crimp the center conductor, but there's a collar on this pin and it doesn't fit. So instead, I'm just sizing the distance here again. That looks a touch long. So I'm going to just snip off like a millimeter. So instead of using that center hole to crimp the center pin, I have these old school RG59 cable TV crimpers from Radio Shack. And I like to use those, and this is just a crimp by feel. It doesn't take much pressure. You just want to get enough crush on there that you have a firm connection, but it's not distorting the diameter of the pin to the point where it's not going to slip through the connector or fatigue and break. And with a braided multi-strand center conductor cable, you need to solder that tip on. And I thought I had one of those cable types here to do a soldering demo, but turns out I don't. So maybe if there's some interest, I'll put one of those together in the future. You can let me know in the comments below, or maybe there's better tutorials out there on the nets. I haven't looked. So next up, I'm just trying to line up. And here I've forgotten because it's been 6 months. This particular connector, I actually stabbed it and made a new hole versus going through the center hole. Some of the other BNC connectors, I think like the Canary brand maybe, there's like a better taper that fishes that center conductor through the nut connector, where this one I have to eyeball it. So next up, I got everything flush and tight, and just gonna put the crimp on. And really all you need is a single crimp, but I like to do a second bite just to get a little better stress restrain. And then these outer boots are for stress restrain as well. And that boot, I think, is the wrong size. It's a little too loose. So I'm going to put a little glue in there later in the video. I got to go find my hot glue gun. So stand by to see that process. So this cable's done. Now I should test it, but I've made enough of these. I'm confident we're good. Next cable, I don't remember what happened to this one. I have so many broken cables stacked up on the shelf that I don't know the history here, but one side it's obvious it needs a connector. The other one now, it's got this tape on here, which leads me to believe maybe that side's bad as well. Not really sure. And this is why the universal tie the cable in a knot is super obvious versus, I don't know if that tape was on there because the boot was sliding and it was to prevent that, or if it's got an intermittent connection. But at any rate, cut that off of there. And then next I got to strip the boot back, and it looks like this one has some glue in there, and it feels like an epoxy versus hot glue because it's bonded so well. I can't get it off of there. And we'll do an edit here. I basically bailed on this cable. I couldn't get the boot off, and I didn't want to spend a bunch of time slicing it away. It's just easier. I gotta reel a cable, so might as well. If it needs 2 connectors, I'm just gonna use brand new cable. All right, starting fresh, new piece of cable. That was a 3-footer, but I'm gonna make the new one 6 feet. Digging through my parts bag, I've got some boots here. I don't know if these are OEM or a generic brand. They weren't stamped, so it's leading me to believe they're a generic because they don't quite fit snug. They're a little on the loose side, which I'll solve with some hot glue. In my youth, I worked on the build out of several outside broadcast trucks, as well as a few studio and post-production facilities. One in Los Angeles years ago with 2 of my friends I'm still in contact with and work with. But 3 of us, myself, Kip, and Bernard, we spent a week, maybe 2 weeks, huddled around a little card table in a studio, building out a post-production facility. We made, I bet I crimped 1,000 BNC connectors. My palm of my hands were all bruised. Like I've never experienced finger pain like I did after that week, crimping BNCs. And we also soldered probably 250 XLR and tip ring sleeve 1/4-inch connectors, the telco type, not the standard music type, for patch panels in the central machine room in this facility. I'm trying to remember. I think it had 3, it might have been 4 edit bays. And this is back in the day with tape decks, SDI and pre-read linear editing, as well as Avids. And so instead of buying $50,000, $60,000 tape decks for each edit bay, you would have 1 deck or 2 decks for each tape format in a centralized machine room. And then you just had patch panels to route the input and output to the corresponding edit bay. So the outer wire is the shielding. I want to peel all of that back so that there's no risk of a single strand touching the center conductor. Obviously, if you get 1 strand creating a short, the cable is going to be bad. And then that pushes up over the outside diameter of the nut connector, and it gets compressed between the collar and the nut connector when you crimp to create a solid connection. So I noticed on these particular pins, they've got a hole in them that I assume that hole is so that you can solder in place if you've got tinned cable, which this isn't. And if I tinned it myself, I think it would increase the diameter to the point where it wouldn't fit in the center conductor. So the crimp has always held for me. I haven't had any issues. I do know there were tighter tolerances, or there are tighter tolerances for anything with the RF transmission, but SDI is pretty much you either have picture or you don't. Back in the days of analog composite video and component, you could get some signal noise in your picture from cables that have too much resistance. And again, these specific connectors have just been giving me trouble. I'm having a hard time lining up that pin in the hole in the center. That white insulator material is just soft enough that it's easy when you apply pressure to the connector to poke a new hole, causing the pin to emerge off center. So if I were to make several dozen cables, I think I would try a different brand or model connector. I haven't had this trouble in the past. Worked on a project once as a cam op, live telecast. We were in a downtown of a major city, and the television truck was parked on the side of the street, and the satellite uplink truck was across the street. And they laid down Bumblebee cable crossovers across the street so that the cable runs linking the two trucks were protected from vehicle traffic. And this was like a quick remote. It was a secondary event. The main event was at an arena. And we had this quick thing. I think it was like 20 minutes or something of airtime. At any rate, I was opping a camera, so I wasn't in the know. But there was only one BNC sending the program feed from the TV truck to the sat truck, and some disgruntled pedestrian cut the cable during the broadcast. I worked an NFL game. It was, first season of the Rams when they returned to Los Angeles. I was shooting B-roll of one athlete during the game from the end zone for a feature package, and my assignment was to shoot first half of the game and then at halftime run back to the TV compound, and on the side of the building, I think this was the LA Coliseum. I don't remember if it was like a temporary trailer or part of the Coliseum, but it was like outdoors in the compound. To patch my camera with a BNC cable into I don't remember, port, let's say 19 on this patch panel, call New York, have them record, and I would play back my footage, selects in camera, so they could record and assemble it for a highlight show that was post-game. So I had to do that at halftime and again at the end of the game. And that patch panel was downhill from the porta potty for the TV compound, and the porta potty was leaking. And it was like a low spot. So I had to stand in like an inch of slippery liquid in like 90-degree heat while my footage was feeding. Just another day of glamour in television. I worked a few seasons as a video utility in Boston when I was a student, and the truck we worked off of was covering college and some high school football and basketball games. I remember just football season. Some of these colleges, smaller colleges, I'd have to run. We didn't have triax on that truck. It was the old school multi-core, like 26-pin multi-conductor cable. It's like thick and heavy. I could wrap those coils. I think they were 75-footers, but I was like a 130-pound scrawny kid, and I couldn't carry those things. So I'd have to get one of the other guys on the crew to drag the thing back to the truck for me. But anyway, I'd run that stuff under these bleachers in freezing, icy, snowy weather. And then post-game, you'd have to wrap it all out, and you'd have like people drinking during the game and peeing under the bleachers on my cable. Next cable is a better quality. It's a thicker diameter, but much more pliable and soft. It tends to lie flat on the ground. It works better for temporary use, where that green stuff's really made for permanent install. The green stuff I've gotten in trouble where like it won't always lie flat. You'll get like little lifts and loops, so it can become a tripping hazard. So I can't get this boot off, so I'm going to go put some water and dish soap on it to break it free. For this cable, I ordered replacement connectors from B&H based on the model of the cable. I just keyed it into the search bar for B&H, and the connectors came up. You can see here that the crimping collar is a larger diameter than the green cable, and my stripper and crimper are obviously sized for the smaller one, so I'm going to try to use those and just go gentle and be cautious here, do extra spins and see if I can get it to strip. I don't want to resize the depth gauges on this stripper because my truck is all green cable. Wrapping cable, the endless debate. Is it over, under, or over, over? Well, I stopped trying to understand it or fight for one over the other and have learned to just like wrap it. Whoever owns the cable, I just ask them, how do you want me to wrap it? And that's how I do it. Now, BNC, I know when you have this solid copper center conductor, you generally want to do an over-under wrap so that you're not creating a continuous twist on that copper, which will cause it to fatigue and eventually break inside the cable. I think cable that has multiple pins or multi-strand, as a general rule, you want to wrap those over. They tend to make nicer coils and uncoil and lie flat. Whereas this like more stiff center single conductor triaxial cable, BNC cable, certainly needs the over under. Let me know in the comments below. What's your theory and preference on wrapping BNC versus XLR mic cable versus triaxial cable, or maybe like a multi-pin DMX cable or distro Bates and banded? Let me know in the comments below. All right, my first strip was too short, so trying again here. This is the first time ever for me on this cable type. And again, I'm not using tools that are sized for the cable, so it's extra tedious. Now, why not just throw this broken cable away and buy a brand new one? Well, this is a 50-footer, and I think this goes right around $100 for this cable, complete and assembled, where a replacement connector is like under $5. You can buy a cheap crimper for like $10, but don't do that. A quality crimper, I mean, mine is like 30 years old. I just looked them up. $70 for a ratcheting BNC crimper. That's what's to search for. And the stripping tool is the same thing. There's like Amazon cheapos for 10, but you want to buy a quality one. Same thing. This is my original one, the only one I've ever owned, and they're a little over $100. So all in, for under $200, you get your toolkit for replacing cables. Like I said, you can be the person to save the day out in the field when a cable goes down and a spare is not available. You just need 5 to 20 minutes to strip and crimp. Now, this shielding is much thicker than the green cable, so I'm realizing I'm going to have to trim back some of it and thin it down to slip the collar on. These blue-handled cutters are new to me. I just learned about them. These are an inexpensive set off of Amazon. Now that I've used them, I'm going to buy a bigger pair specifically for cutting BNC cable. The conventional cutters, those electrician's cutters I was using, crush the cable too much, where these side cuts make a nice clean snip. I purchased those blue ones specifically for cutting the ends off of zip ties. They allow you to get a nice clean flush cut with no tab that sticks out that can scratch and cut skin. On my ratcheting crimpers, the bigger die diameter, it does provide a crimp, but it doesn't quite feel tight enough. I'm not sure if that's rated proper for these or not, so I'm going to use my manual crimpers to just put a little extra torque on there to finish them off. This cable repair process went on for quite a while, and I was just scrubbing through the footage to see. I guess I didn't record the hot gluing of the cable restraints, but I basically just put a little tab of hot glue on the metal connector and then push the boot up over it, and that just closes the diameter, so you got a nice snug fit since my boots are a little loose. And like I said, I think that's just because I purchased the wrong size, or they're generic boots versus OEM. All right, well, I thought this was going to be a 3-minute video on crimping a BNC, and I turned it into 20. I'm going to wrap this up here. I'm taking the next 2 weeks off. I don't have any production lined up, doing a little family time. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get a video up or not, so if I go missing for 2 weeks, that's why. But I don't know, if something sparks my interest, or you throw a comment below that's something I can just narrate on versus doing the BTS thing, I'm open to that. And as always, let's continue the discussion in the comments below. I read every single one of them. I apologize if I haven't replied to them all. I tend to click through those when I'm in the airport or in motion. So they get read, and I appreciate all of it. Thanks for watching.